they have not seen in over 2 years living out in Tucson. So we do greatly appreciate the opportunity to come and be here with you this weekend, but also the time that we've been able to have with family. So I want to kind of start off, just kind of tell you my story, kind of already kind of started that, but I grew up in Southern Illinois and went to church my whole life. I was born premature, 2 months premature. I grew out of that. And I'm thankful for that. But I weighed 4 pounds, 4 ounces. There was no NICU back then. Mom swaddled me and put me in a pan and set me on the stove. That is a true story. And I was at church, I think, the next week. And so I've been in church my whole life. I was raised in church. I had Christian parents. We lived a mile from church. Back then we had Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, youth, cleaning, eatings, people coming over. My dad was one of the go-to fix-its because we lived a mile from the church. But I just kind of grew up in church my whole life. Kind of thought I had been saved via osmosis because I had been in church so much. I must know Jesus because my mom and dad know Jesus, and it was really all I knew. But at the age of 16, for probably several weeks, I really got under this conviction. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I was the leader in the youth group. I was very active at the church. I was going to a church plant at that time that Cliff Donahoe had started in Salem, Illinois. And we were heading off to Camp Hope. It was a great camp. I wish I could go there, take my kid there now. It's actually going still right now, and Ernie Lewis still runs that. You guys might know him. He sits on the stage at the National, but he still runs the teen camp there. And I remember I went and I was like, I don't care what they speak on Monday. I don't know if you've ever been under conviction, like where you couldn't sleep. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you just have this conviction, you just can't sleep. And I hadn't slept for like days, and we get to camp and I'm like, I don't care what this is about. Like I'm rededicating my life to the Lord. This is happening. And so like it was altar call time, Camp Hope. Don't remember the guy speaking. Don't remember what he talked about. But I went down to the altar. I cried, rededicated my life to the Lord. Tell everybody they're all so proud of me, pat me on the back. And I'm like, I'm going to sleep tonight. You don't normally want to sleep at camp, but that's what I did. I went back and was like, let's go to bed. And could not sleep. And the next day, couldn't figure it out. I was like, God, what do you want from me? And then on Wednesday, I realized I had never made a personal profession of faith in Jesus Christ. I had my mom and dad's faith. I had the faith of going to church my whole life, but I had never made the decision to ask Christ to forgive me of my sins. So at the age of 16, on a Wednesday night at camp, after rededicating my life on Monday, I went back up to the altar and said, I want to get saved. And they're like, what? And they're like, oh, you're like a leader in the youth group. I'm like, I know, but can we just do this thing? And so I asked Christ into my life. And then the next night, Thursday, was the bonfire. And that night at the bonfire, Wednesday night after I went back to the room, I was like, I'm going to sleep good. And I could not sleep, and I still had this conviction on me. And I was like, God, like, can a guy get like a weekend break or something? Like just a moment? And the next night on Thursday at the bonfire, I answered the call into the ministry. And 2 weeks later, I preached my first sermon at Ernie Lewis's church in Blue Point. And I've been speaking ever since then, since that time. And I've been in full-time ministry now for 25 years. So I was in Lucama, North Carolina as a youth pastor for 5 years, which is where I picked up my beautiful North Carolina wife. And she did not attend the church. I actually was a single guy doing youth ministry, and I had been on more blind dates than any blind person had ever been on. And, I remember the couple came to me and they said, hey, we've got this girl, and I stopped them. I'm like, you can bring her, but I'm not dating her. And so they brought her. She wanted to see the Solid Rock Cafe. I knew what she wanted to see, but she wanted to see the Solid Rock Cafe. And so she came, and when you walk in the back door, just humor me. I had hair back then, and I was muscular. It's just turned to fat. I don't know what happened. But what did you say, baby, in your head? You did not say I was so handsome. That is a church answer. You said I was hot. Thank you. Go to Sunday school and you go, hey kids, I saw this thing. I want you to tell me what it is. It's furry. It has a furry tail and it eats nuts. What is it? And the little kid raises his hand and goes, I think it's a squirrel, but I'm going to say Jesus. So that's the church answer. And I saw her and thought she was beautiful. I showed her around. She left that night. She did not give me her number. I tracked her number down that night, called her, and what did I tell you on that first phone conversation? Tell them. They'll know I'm crazy and not listen to another thing I say. What?
The Lord told me I'm going to marry you.
I'm going to marry you. 30 days later, we were engaged. 60 days after that, we were married. And we are going on 22 years this year. So thank you.
Recommend that.
Yeah, it was not always easy. Leave it at hot and let's move on. Okay. And so I married my wife, and then shortly after that, we moved to Homerville, Georgia. When I went to Homerville, that was a smaller church in a smaller town of about 3,000, county of about 8,000. It was a church revitalization is the way I looked at it. It was a church that ran about 40. At that time, they were very inwardly focused, just had their eyes on themselves and taking care of themselves. And so we spent a decade there turning that around. We built a new facility while we were a 400-seat auditorium while we were there, remodeled the entire place, and we were there for, like I said, a decade, and got to see that church change from inwardly focused to being one of the second or third largest giving churches in the state, to outwardly focused missionaries and church planners, and leaving the church facilities to actually go to events like in the community. And seeing some great changes there is really wonderful. And so that was an awesome time in our life. We enjoyed all of our time there. And then God called me. I told God, I kept getting asked to be a church planner. And I was like, God, I'm not a church planner. I don't want to be a church planner. I'm never going to be a church planner. And we just built this new facility, and I got a corner office, and we now finally have staff, and I don't have to do youth ministry, be the pastor and the janitor. So I think I'm good. And never tell God you're not going to do something, because about 2 years later, I was a church planner. And so we moved to Tucson, Arizona, actually Marana. So Marana butts up to Tucson. It's really literally a suburb of Tucson. Our church is in a Tucson address, but in Marana city limits. I don't understand how that works. But we have been there for 11 years. Our church is 10 years old this August. And God has just blessed us there, and we've seen a lot of great things happen. And I think we've seen 243, I think. I don't remember. I should know the number. We just changed it, but I think we're at 243. I'm going to use that number. 243 baptisms to date. And so it's been an amazing time seeing people's lives change and seeing people come to know Jesus Christ. And a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about this morning is going to come from this history of 25 years. Leaders are learners. Leaders are learners. And so I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being leaders, because leaders take the time to learn. And so I appreciate that so very much of you taking time on a Saturday morning when you could have been sleeping in, right? And we appreciate you being here so very much. I want to start off with this. I want to ask you guys a question. So and I'm hoping you're not all, who are my talkers in the room? And just own it. Thank you. There's just one. That's it. Raise your hand if you're a talker and don't lie. Hold it up. Let me see. This is going to be so boring. Okay. You guys are not allowed to talk. All the quiet people are going to talk. Okay. It's going to be amazing. And I promise you will not die. All right. You will not die if you talk. I promise. So I want you to just kind of tell me your testimony. Think 60-second kind of deal. But what led to you becoming a Christ follower? What led to you becoming a Christ follower? Who's going to go first? Don't wait, because there's that whole scripture about not being ashamed, and I'd hate to throw that in your face. So who wants to go? What led to you being a Christ follower? And go. Yes.
Like you grew up all surrounded by it and everything, but then just went.
You grew up in a Christian home?
Oh, Lord.
Okay.
A Christian 60 people family.
Okay, whole family. You couldn't even run from it. I got you.
Yeah, and just a lot of bad things took place, and I made a lot of bad decisions and was at the very rock bottom. And he just spoke to me when he just needed to speak to me. And then realizing that he still loved me and had a purpose, no matter how I felt about myself. And then from then, just a lot of changes. There's been a lot of, yeah, I don't even really want to be here because I'm not feeling it. But I know that I need to step back in, because you can wallow too much and it's just bad, you know.
That's
but
great.
Anyway, I have been a believer for like 20-something years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. And you know, aren't you so thankful that Aren't you so thankful that God loves you right where you're at?
Yes.
I'm so thankful for that He loves you right where you're at, and He knows where you're at. He knows what you're going through.
Yes.
And I tell people in our church, because right now, especially during COVID, new habits have been created, and some of those are not good habits, especially when it comes to church attendance. And And I'm like, when you least feel like coming, that's when you need to go the most. I tell people that all the time, so that's awesome. Who else? What led you to Christ? What was your to become a Christ follower? Oh, some of you are like, please don't look at me, please don't look at me, please don't look at me. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'll eat the first one.
I appreciate it. I was feeling awkward up here.
My grandmother and grandfather. When I was 12, my grandfather passed away. But when I was a little thing, my mom used to dress me up every Sunday and send me to church. And I'd walk to church about 4 or 5 blocks, and that went on every Sunday. But when I reached 12, my grandfather died, and my grandmother, invited us to her church. So we went there, and about a year later, I got saved. I got really convicted. I started having bad dreams about going to hell and things like that. And I just said, I got to do something. So I went in, so I went to the altar and dedicated my life to the Lord, sought forgiveness, and have been walking for over 50 years now. And, but yeah, and I mean, I've been through a lot of things have happened, but thank the good Lord that I'm still walking that path,
Thankful for that heritage. My mom grew up in somewhat of a difficult home, and her grandma took her to church. And I actually got to visit that church a couple years ago. I think it was like 125 years old or something. They'd actually bulldozed the original building and built a new facility. Still a thriving church there in this little town, but thankful for that legacy. Thank you for sharing that. Who else? Give me at least one or two more. Yes.
I grew up on the other side, not going to church.
Okay.
Living in a family environment that was something that I did not want to do. I knew that there was something else, so I wanted that in my life, not what I grew up.
That's awesome. I was actually looking for that testimony. Thanks. Everybody doesn't have a heritage of faith, right? Everybody doesn't have a grandma or grandpa or a mom and dad or hasn't been steeped in that. And I'm thankful that my mom, I said a minute ago, my mom had a difficult life growing up. When she got older, she said, I'm going to live a different life than I had growing up. And I'm thankful for that. I wouldn't be standing here. My mom lives with us right now. If this is not going public, right, but my mom probably has dementia or Alzheimer's. And we're just in the beginning stages of that, but she lives with us, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. And she made some hard decisions to not go down, and she broke the cycle, and is still a wonderful example. Reads her Bible daily, and we see that in our house every day. So thankful for that. One more. Yeah, I was about to call on your table anyway because nobody said anything. So
more or less, I was kind of scared into religion.
Yeah.
They showed a movie at our church. We always just went to church every time the doors were open, but it was just something that you did. You just go to church.
Yeah.
So
that's still happening today.
yeah. And then there was one night at our church they showed a movie called The Burning Hell.
Mm-hmm.
Scared the bejesus out of me, and I ran to the altar, and that's the night that I know I gave my heart to God. I know it was not just I didn't want to go to hell. I knew that I wanted to be a child of God.
Yeah.
And make sure that I was His child and He protected me. And of course, through the years, that was like I was 11 years old. So through the years, of course, I had moments where the realization went from not being so much scared into heaven that I don't want to go to hell to a relationship.
Yeah.
So,
God can definitely use those things. When I was in Georgia, there was a church that always did Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames. Do you ever see that? And then at Halloween, they'd always do that. And then we did something in Georgia called the Live Crucifixion Scene. It was really awesome. And it was out on the highway. We're in a little tiny town of 2,800, and we'd have 2,000 people from hours away come and go through. It was very cool. But God uses those types of things, drama, to draw us to Himself. And this is eternity. And so what I want to say to you this morning is, as we talk about this, if you're just sitting here listening for information, I'm going to bore you to death. But what we have to have is a transformation of mind. What we have to have is a transformation of what's important to us. Because no matter how much we say we love God, we love ourselves a lot too. And there's this flesh and spirit battle going on constantly between what God says is important and what we say is important. And so today we want to think about those things. We want to think about what is important to God and what am I willing to do what is important to God because it's eternity. You wouldn't be sitting here if someone had not shown that film, and God used that at that time. And you know, I tell people, like, God is constantly nudging me, like, and I don't know why, but it always happens at Walmart. It's the weirdest thing. We have so many people that come to our church I met in Walmart, and I'm just like taking something back, talk to this person. Like, I don't want to talk to this person, God. Like, I don't know them. And he's like, talk to them, and then they come to church. And you know, we've had several cashiers that we see, and they come to our church, and God will just say, talk to them, because you don't know what people are going through, but God does. See, it's not about the work that I can do, it's about the work that he's already doing. And am I going to be listening carefully enough and caring enough to step into those margins of life? Because all of this stuff happens usually in the margins of life. When you're in a hurry, that's when we miss opportunities. And so it's in those margins of life when the Holy Spirit speaks, we don't go, oh, I'm scared, I'm nervous, what am I going to say? We go, okay, God, you must already be doing something. Let me just step out by faith and speak. Because we're that vessel, right? We have been given this ministry of reconciliation. And so we have this great opportunity. So I want to ask you a question. So raise your hand if you grew up in church or you grew up with a heritage maybe of Christian family. Just raise your hand. Hold those up high. Okay.Hold them up real high because I want everybody to look around the room. Look around the room. Okay, so there's about 30 people in this room, maybe a few more. I want to say that this is going to be a good cross-section of your church. Okay? So I need you to see this number. So everybody hold your hand up high. All right? Now put your hands down. If you did not grow up in church, nothing wrong with this, okay? But if you did not grow up in church, you didn't have Christian parents, raise your hand. So in this room, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I want you to just keep that in your mind. I want you to think about that because we're going to think about that as we go on, okay? So tell me a story. For those of you that already talked, you're forbidden to talk now. Until the next question. So I need new people. But tell me a story of a bad restaurant experience that you have had that made you not want to go back, and why? What made that restaurant experience bad? Tell me. Come on, I know some of you have not tipped people before. I see it. I know it. I'm making jokes. Don't get offended. Who's had a bad restaurant experience? Tell me about it. What happened? What made it bad? You found a snail on the salad bar. That's pretty disgusting.
I don't want to know where they're.
All right, I don't know if we can.
I don't want to know where.
He's like, don't tell me. It might be my favorite place. It's my go-to place. So there was a snail on the salad bar. Who else? Who else has had a bad restaurant experience? So it was dirty. There was live animals crawling on your food. That's just disgusting. Yes, sir.
I was at a barbecue place getting something to eat.
Uh-huh.
The waitress came up behind me and she spilled a whole pitcher of tea down my back.
Wow. Wow, that's what.
She stumbled. I got a t-shirt for it. I had to make my barbecue with it.
But I want to ask the question: do you go back there?
Yeah.
Okay, so they spilled tea on you, but they gave you a free T-shirt. Hey, wait a minute. There's some truth here. Remember this. They got tea spilt on him, but they gave him a free T-shirt, and he still goes back. You're going to get used in this conversation later. Who else has had a bad experience and stop being shy? You two young folks right here, I know you got a story. Come on, talk to me. Everybody eats out. Somebody over here? Who's had a bad restaurant experience? Why didn't you go back? Okay, tell me. See, I knew you had one. I saw it in your face. He's like, and you're like,
I was trying to figure out which one.
all right. You can use both of them. We don't care. Tell me.
We had to sit at a restaurant for around 2 hours. We didn't actually get our food until around 10 p.m.
Wow. So the service was slow. Did they even come like tell you we're sorry? Did they give it to you for free? Did they offer you a free T-shirt? Wow. Have you been back? No, you haven't been back. Okay, so poor service, long wait times, that makes them not want to go back. What else? One more bad. Come on, I'm enjoying this. Listen, if you have to be light, or I'm going to get nervous. And you know what happens when I get nervous? What happens when I get nervous, babe? Talks a long time. This goes till 12, but we can go longer. All right? Okay, so tell me.
We were at Red Lobster in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Wow, he just called them out. Red Lobster, Fayetteville, North Carolina. All right.
Well, we waited about 45 minutes for a table.
Uh-huh.
We finally sit down. They bring us our biscuits, which that's the best part of the meal anyway.
Yeah.
But and then you start hearing something, and people are getting up and leaving their tables. Somebody set a fire in the bathroom. So after waiting 45 minutes, finally getting the table, we had to get up and leave the restaurant.
Wow.
Fire department come.
Wow. Speaking of fire departments, I texted him this last night. We're at our hotel. It's like 10:40. Thank you. The hotel is wonderful. And I was literally, you know, where you're just like, I'm going to sleep. And then the loudest noise ever, the fire alarm, and everybody in the hotel comes out. Fire trucks came. I think a guy was smoking in his room. They wouldn't tell me. They refused to tell me. And but anyway, I hope they kicked him out. That's all I'm saying. I hope he finds another hotel because Jesus loves him. But anyway, yeah, that was crazy. So the fire department came. You had to wait 45 minutes. It's a long wait time. That is crazy. We've all had bad experiences on some level, whether it's at a store or a restaurant or whatever. But I want you to think about this. If a guest has a bad experience at your church, that's about eternity, not lobster. That's about eternity, not barbecue. It's about eternity. And you can say, well, if they don't like our church, they might go somewhere else. Well, that's true. But you also might be the church they walk up to. That's the only church they've gotten the courage to walk into. So let's look at the why. Why do we need to talk about maximizing our guest experience? I'm going to need some help again. So those of you that have your phones or a Bible, I need somebody to look up Matthew chapter 25, verses 35 through 40. Matthew 25, 35 through 40. You're going to read that for me? Who's raising their hand? It's the word of God. You love it. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. Jesus is watching. Who's reading Matthew 25, 35 through 40? Thank you. Will you do it? All right, Matthew 25, 35 through 40. If there's any big words that you can't pronounce, you just say Snickers, okay? Romans 12, 9 through 13. Thank you. I was getting worried. Romans 12, 9 through 13, and Hebrews 13, 1 and 2. Okay? All right. So we're gonna look at these three scriptures to think about the why. The why. So would you read Matthew 25, 35 through 40, and just read that as loud as you can.
For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you, a stranger, and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick, or were in prison, and visit you? And the king will answer them and say, I assure you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me.
Awesome, thank you. Is he called into preaching? He has a preacher's voice. Just throwing it out there. I heard it. I felt the nudge. Think about that. Just be thinking about it, is all I'm saying. Did you feel it? He read it like a pastor. Like, I'm like, maybe I'll step down and you just come on up here. And he was like, I might get saved again. It could be awesome. So the why, because he said, when did you do this? When did you feed me? When did you give me water? When did you care for me? When you took care of the least of these. When you took care of the least of these. Romans 12, 9 through 13. You got that one?
Yeah.
Romans 12, 9 through 13. Let me hear it.
Let love be genuine, abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, and serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality.
Seek to show hospitality. Listen, we are to love one another. Like, I feel like if you just had Chick-fil-A tea, that's being hospitable. Like, I appreciate that. Like, we are to be hospitable. We are to go above and beyond. Listen, when you go to a restaurant and someone spills tea down your back and gives you a t-shirt, you go back. It tells me a lot. When you go to Red Lobster, have to wait a long time, and the bathroom's burning, you're done. And you had to wait 2 hours, and you're done. So, but think about this. What is the experience that guests have when they come to your church? Think about that. Think about that experience. Hebrews 13, 1 and 2.
Let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware.
So I'm going to tell you a story, and I am by no means saying this guy was an angel, but the scripture says, be hospitable to strangers, because you don't know, you might have been attending to an angel unaware. When I was in Homerville, Georgia, we had an older gentleman. He was I'm this tall, so he was like this tall. The guy's got a beard. He is filthy from head to toe. Filthy. He reeks of urine, earth, feces. But he came into our church. We welcomed him. We got him something to drink. He came to our service. After the service was over, me and a couple of our deacons got together with him, and we spoke to him. And we found out he was trying to get somewhere. He's trying to get back to the East Coast. And I said, well, look, I'm going to need to make some phone calls. I'm going to need to look into some stuff. Let me see what we can do. I said, but what I want to do right now is I want to take you and I want to get you a hotel room. I want to get you a hotel room so you can clean up, you can refresh. And so me and my wife, I believe you were with me. I think who? Oh, that's right. It was Josh. Josh was with me. We went to the dollar store, because in Homerville, the dollar store was your Walmart. And because there was no Walmart. You had to drive 30 miles to go to Walmart. And so I go to the dollar store. I buy him a suitcase. I buy him new blue jeans, new shoes, new socks, new underwear, new shirt, new everything. I get him all razor, shaving cream, deodorant, soap, the whole 9 yards. And I take that all to him. We take him to the hotel there in the little town, and we put him up there. And then I'm working on all of this other stuff and find out, hey, we can get him a bus ticket for like $150 or something. It's going to get him where he needs to go. And we tell him that, and the guy just weeps. He just weeps. It's $150. Like, what is $150? Like, and he just weeps. And so he goes in the room and he takes my stuff and he puts it on. And he's like, can you wait just a minute? And he goes in and he puts my stuff on. Oh, he loved this stuff we got him. Yeah, it makes me feel so good, you know. I'm so happy that he loves it. And then he goes here, and he has all his stuff. Underwear, shirt, pants, socks. And he hands them to me. And I had to touch them. And I take them home, and I'm not kidding, the socks are filled with urine, the pants, feces. And we put them in our washing machine. We washed them, I don't know, a dozen times. Then we washed our washing machine a dozen times. And the next morning we go to pick him up, and it's me and a couple of the men and Josh at the time. And we take him to Valdosta, about a 35-minute drive. We're going to carry him to the airport. When we get there, he's like, hey, I'm almost ready. He's got my clothes on, and you can tell he had shaved and stuff, cleaned up and took a shower. And he was feeling better. You could just tell he felt better about himself. And I said, hey, here's your stuff, you know, if you want to put that in your suitcase or whatever. And he said, well, just give me just a minute. And about 5 minutes later, he came out of the room, and all the new stuff I had bought him was in the suitcase. And all of his stuff was on him. That was his stuff. And we drove him to the bus company, put him on the bus, and, you know, all the guys are like, hey, let's go. And I'm like, guys, I travel all over the place. I've never traveled anywhere where somebody didn't pick me up, where somebody wasn't waiting for me, thinking about me, going to welcome me. And I said, we're going to wait till he comes around. And when he came around, he was face glued to the window waving. I don't even know he'd seen us yet. And I waved at him. We told him, I never saw him again. I never heard from him again. I don't know anything about him more than what I just told you. But a couple of months later, we got this huge check from some company in Colorado. To this day, I don't know a connection. So I don't know. I'm not calling him an angel. I'm not saying this. But what I will say is there was a dirty guy who needed clothing and food and water. And oftentimes what we do is go, God bless you. Hope you get your needs taken care of. And then we go on about our business, because see, it's in the margins of life. I'm going to say it again. It took time out of my Saturday to take him to Valdosta. It's in the margins of life when we slow down and we listen to God. So we need to be hospitable, because we never know what people are going to walk up to our doors on Sunday morning. At the Springs Church, this has happened several times. We've had people who were literally, they were going to commit suicide, and they said, I think I'll go to church first. I want to ask you a question. If you knew somebody was walking up to your church and you knew they were going to commit suicide, if you could see that, if you could have that information, how would you treat them? Would you welcome them? Would you hug them? Would you say, can I be your friend? Can I sit down with you? Can I sit by you? If we knew that, because we are compassionate and loving and caring people who are often super tied up in our own little circles, right? But what would we do? We had a lady came to our church in Homerville. She was definitely had mental struggles that she was struggling with. Who doesn't have mental struggles, honestly? I have mental struggles. Let's just be real. Who doesn't have some mental anxiety or stress or depression, and especially in this season? But this lady really struggled. And there was one night, she'd been coming to our church for a little while. We'd gotten her plugged into a life group, and that life group had become a lifeline to her. And that life group had just stopped because we stopped after semesters, and it had just stopped. And they would still keep up with her, and they were still getting together occasionally, but it had stopped. And one night I woke up at 3 in the morning. I don't typically wake up at 3 in the morning, but I woke up at 3 in the morning. I pick up my Facebook page, and I'm going to say something. This is not, oh, you have a lot of friends, because honestly, I don't even know how many friends that are actually friends on Facebook. But I have like 3,800 friends on Facebook. And so my feed is full of stuff. And so I picked up my phone at 3 a.m. and the very first thing on my feed is this lady. And about 50 minutes earlier, she had created a post that was her last words. She was killing herself. I woke my wife up. I had her read it. 30, 40 people on the East Coast who were already awake at this point were commenting, someone please help, what can we do? Nobody knew how to contact. They didn't know where she lived. It was a thing. And so I called the police. And the police showed up. Long story short, the police and the nurse that came out to speak to me later said if it had been even 20 more minutes, she would have been dead. It took 3 days for them to wake her up. She had taken so much medicine. My point is this, is we don't know what people are going through, but we ought to be the people who care the most about what people are going through. And so we have to love people. We have to be compassionate. We have to honor them. We have to be hospitable to them. And that's the why. That's the why. Have any of you ever had a bad day? Raise your hand if you've had a bad day. I'm glad you just had a bad day. It's been a bad year for me. I'm just be honest. It's been a hard one. It's been tough. No, but we've all had bad days. We've all had struggles. We've all had those seasons in our life. So I want to talk to you about this. What do you do when companies come into your house? What do you do when companies come into your house? Let's move on to that next slide. We clean the house. We clean the bathrooms. Notice that bathrooms is in all capital letters. Okay? Your bathroom is on fire. We don't want to go to that extreme, all right? But clean the bathrooms, all right? We get out the best dishes. We cook the best food. We behave on our best behavior. Like right before a company comes over, like, be quiet, straighten up, put a smile on your face. You know, we're like on our best behavior. We're attentive to our guests. We anticipate their needs. Like, I'm sorry, you're not really anticipating my needs, but I'm going to need some more sweet tea in like 10 minutes. So just bring the gallon pitcher. Do I need to write it out for you? No, I'm just kidding. Be attentive to your guest. He has been so attentive to us and make sure everything is taken care of. Anticipate their needs. What else? What else do you do when guests are coming over? What do you do?
Make it smell good.
Make it smell good. Oh my goodness. Guys, I'm going to go broke making our house smell good. My wife, Scentsy, does anybody sell Scentsy? You are not my friend, that's all I'm saying. I should own stock in that company. But my wife always wants the house to smell good. What else do you do if guests are coming over?
Meet them at the door.
Meet them at the door, yeah.
Directions.
Give them directions. Say, hey, put your coat here. Hey, you have to take your keys. Let me hold your wallet. No, that's when you're robbing people. That's a whole different scenario. That's another talk for another day. But why wouldn't we do the same for our church guests? Why wouldn't we do the same for our church guests? Or to be honest with you, even more, because eternity is at stake. So I want to talk to you about the DNA and culture of your church. This is something that you're going to hear me say 2 or 3 times in this talk. And it's something that I have heard, and it's something that I repeat to our staff all the time. And I really want this to settle in. And if you don't, I hope you remember more than just this, but I really want you to remember this. Everything we do and don't do speaks. Not just everything we do and don't do speaks. Everything we say and don't say speaks. Everything. It's sending a message. I'm going to say this, and please don't anyone feel guilty, but I am going to say it. And then Miss Kim came over and sat next to my wife and was like, you're messing up my thing. But the first, literally up until 2 minutes before we were going to be starting, my wife was sitting here, the only guest in the room, and she was sitting by herself. And no one sat with her. until the pastor's wife came and sat with her, and then you wonderful people came and sat with her. Thank you. All the rest of these people need to get their lives right with Jesus. All of them. I'm just kidding. Don't get it. Hey, if this guy gets up, make sure he doesn't set your bathrooms on fire. Okay? That's all I'm saying. So, but we have to think about that. This is what this whole talk is about. It is about thinking about it. It's about changing what we think about the second we walk on the church campus. Am I thinking about me, or am I thinking about others? Am I thinking about who I'm going to see, the people that I know, the people that I'm close to, or am I going to look for those people and search those people out that may be like my wife knew today? And although we're not going to come back and my wife is not offended in any way, I'm just saying it is natural human tendency to gather in your closest circle of friends because that's your comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having close relationships. There's nothing wrong with loving people. There's nothing wrong with having close fellowship. But sometimes we have to learn to turn and look out. And we're going to talk about that. So, are you expecting guests? Are you expecting guests? Remember, everything we do and don't do speaks. Everything we say and don't say speaks. Are you expecting guests? Do you know, how long do you think you have before a guest has made up in their mind whether or not they're going to come back to your church? How long do you think you have? Somebody throw out a number.
2 minutes.
How long?
2.
2 minutes, okay. Anybody else?
20 seconds.
20 seconds. I'm going to say that you're the closest. You have about 8 seconds. 8 seconds. What has somebody done at your church in 8 seconds? They've been in the parking lot. They pulled in the parking lot, they've been in the parking lot, and they're looking at the outside of your church. 8 seconds. Now, some of you are going to go, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm telling you, it's true. I am telling you that this 8 seconds for a bull rider is everything. And this 8 seconds for your church is everything. And it matters to your guests. Are you expecting guests? Then you must be prepared for them. So something that we would say is we want to, from the street to their seat, we want to engage every guest, everywhere, every time. Everyone is a guest and everyone is a greeter. That means, who's on the host team? Is that what you call it? Host team? Who's on the host team? Okay, they are not the only greeter. Every person in this room is a guest and a greeter. You know what that means? That everybody in here gets greeted, and everybody in here is greeting other people. And that needs to be the DNA of your church. And I don't mean just greeting your closest circle of friends that you're comfortable with. I mean, you need to greet every guest everyone is a guest and everyone is a greeter. We want to make everyone feel welcome. When we're going to be looking at this 8 seconds and how important it is in a minute, but I want to tell you a story about 2 friends of mine, and this was a 3-year-long story. I want you to know that God doesn't work on your timeline when it comes to souls. As Christians, we like to give people about 3 weeks to get their junk together. I've been talking to that lady for 2 weeks. I guess she ain't coming. We cannot have an agenda in loving people. Tomorrow I'm going to be preaching on loving your neighbor. But we cannot have an agenda on loving people. We have to love people. I have people that we've known for 11 years that have graced our church a few times but don't come, but we're still friends with them. They can still call us. They still know who we are. And some of those relationships, when we lived in our apartment complex, we knew a family for 6 years. We knew that family never came to the church, and then they started coming when we moved in our new building. And now he's my head greeter and is taking names and kicking butt.
So you can't pretend to love them just to get them.
You cannot pretend to love people. Thank you, baby. You cannot pretend to love people. That's why I brought her. You cannot pretend to love people just to get them to come to your church. They will see through that. You cannot have an agenda. You just have to love people like Jesus told us to love people. So what I'm preaching on this tomorrow, ruin it for you, but love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and body and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. We love ourselves a lot. So we have to love our neighbors. So 3 years ago, my daughter got the phone call about what softball team she was on. I don't know if y'all got rec league drama, but where I'm from, it's all aggravating and stuff. I don't get into that because then it's going to be recorded and stuff. I can't have that. My daughter gets the call, and as usual, she did not get on the one team. And because I'm a pastor, that one team, this is not going public, right?
We don't know yet.
Okay, well, don't make it public. So there's a real big control, a Mormon control in our neighborhood. And they controlled the rec league, and they controlled like school PTOs, like so many things. And jokingly, I don't want to say, well, yeah, I just found out the other day that jokingly it's called the Mormon Mafia. But that's what we deal with. And so she just spit her tea out when I said Mormon Mafia. But it's this thing. And so because I was a Christian pastor, my daughter would never get on that team, but all of her kids in her room would, in her classroom, but her. And so this year she didn't get on that team, and I remember I went to, I went and I did what any good dad would do. I creeped her coach on Facebook. That's what you do. And so I looked at him, and I found out some things about him really quickly. I found out that his wife, they were like 36, 37 years old, something like that. And I found out that his wife, like 6 or 7 years earlier, had went into like basically a diabetic coma. Like him and his daughter, Harley, like she's in a nursing home, been in a nursing home on a feeding tube. Like she can move around, but she can't talk to them. It's like almost kind of catatonic. And I looked over at Ava, and Ava was crying. I said, baby, I'm going to tell you something that's hard. I said, but God's put us on this team for a reason, and we're going to have to fight through it. Well, she ended up being on the winningest team because we had kids on there that other parents were asking for their birth certificates because they were so big. And I ended up being an assistant coach, so I got to know him, but just kind of like wasn't even that great of a friendship. I mean, honestly, it's about like I know you and your call into ministry. And so I was meeting with him, and he would call me like once after the year was over. He'd call me like once a year and be like, he'd come over and he'd want me to pray with him, or would talk to me about his wife, and I was just always available. Being available is huge. And so over the last 3 years, he maybe called me 3 times, 4 times, come over to the house a couple times. I'd meet up with him. And this last time he came over, he said, hey, I got this prayer blanket I sent to my wife, and there was a whole story there that went along with it. He said, but I just wanted, could I Zoom? They hadn't been able to go in and touch her, see her for over a year because of COVID. He said, would you just pray with her? And so he comes over to the house, and I pray with him, and I talk to him, and literally the next Sunday, this is 3 years. 3 years. The next Sunday he comes to church, him and his daughter that's a little older than my daughter. The next Sunday he comes to church, him and his daughter. And that was Easter Sunday. And then the next Sunday he comes to church, and he come up to me and he said, hey, do you do that saying yes to Jesus thing every week? I said, yeah, we do, Jim. He said, well, I wanted to say yes, and Harley wanted to say yes last week, but we got scared. I said, well, we're going to do it this week. He said, okay. And at the end of the service, we go through the ABCs of salvation. Admit you're a sinner, believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, confess your sins, choose to follow him. And so they asked Christ in their life. Mom and dad asked Christ in their life. And then from that, and I mean his daughter, him and his daughter, and asked Christ into their life. And from that, his daughter now comes to our house every single Wednesday, even in the summer. When she was in school, her grandma would bring her over to our house. She comes over before my daughter gets out of school and hangs out with my wife, and my wife does crafts with her and loves her, and she can't wait to come. She called in the summertime and said, can we still come? Can I still come over? And we're like, of course you can. And so she comes over, and then my wife takes her and my daughter to youth group, and then her dad picks them up, and then her dad comes over, and we hang out and chat and talk afterwards. We cannot love people with an agenda, and we cannot give up on people because they didn't meet our time frame. We cannot give up on people. I'm going to say this to you. Jim doesn't live the same life that I live. There's things that he might do or say that make me uncomfortable. And I'm going to tell you the number one problem with church people is that they are not used to being uncomfortable. You should not be offended by sinners. Jesus ate with them. And we need to learn to get uncomfortable and live uncomfortable and stop being so easily offended about everything that someone does, because we need to love them for a very long time sometimes. 8 seconds. DNA and culture, next page, please. Guests have to know that they matter to us. I've kind of already talked about that. Everyone has to feel welcome. No one opens their own door. We do everything with excellence. And listen, excellence is doing the absolute best with what you have. Excellence is doing the absolute best with what you have. And I'm going to say this to you. I used to hear this and I would always go, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I finally one day it clicked with me, and I want to share it with you because it's so important. Like, we can talk about this in here today, and you're going to see, and you're going to be able to take notes, and you're going to be able to go, this is great, and I love this pastor, and let's do this pastor. And you can come up with a great strategy. Like, you need a strategy. Like church systems, you got to have a system, you got to have a strategy. You can come up with a great strategy, but please hear me out. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I used to hear that all the time. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I finally realized what they were saying. Here's what they're saying. Listen, we can create a great strategy in here, but if the culture of this church is not to be having eyes on guests, that everyone is a guest and everyone is a greeter, that everyone has to be made to feel like $1,000,000. That's my goal every Sunday. I want everybody to be seen. People are lonely. And if your culture is not that, then the strategy will always fail. Because culture eats strategy for breakfast. Do you get that? All right, so next page. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Your church should not look like a storage unit. The church, Heather, I'm not even halfway done yet. I'm just kidding. She always leaves. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Listen, your church cannot look like a storage unit. And I'm going to say this. I wrote notes prior to ever being at your facility or ever seeing anything, so don't think anything I'm saying is being personal. But I'm going to tell you something, that when I thought our church was going to close its door at year 3, and I got a coach, and I had a coach come in and he coached us and he helped us, and he said, when you guys go to 2 services, when you guys go to 2 services, when you guys go to 2 services, and I paused and I said, hey, hold up here. And I said, I just got to say something. I said, you keep talking about 2 services. And I said, I got to be honest with you, Randy, all I've been thinking about is when are we going to close our doors? And why do we stink so much at this? And this is what he said to me. He said, Jeff, you can't see clearly anymore. You lose perspective. And I'm going to say this. How many of you have attended this church for 5 years? Raise your hand. 10 years? 15 years? 20 years? 30 years? I'm going to tell you this, the longer you attend a church, the less perspective you have. You're not seeing things clearly anymore. You've done it all before, you've seen it all before, and you've got to stop and say, God, let me see what you want me to see. We just have to step back and do that. Do you know that as our church at 10 years old, 1, church plants are the #1 evangelical tool that there is. 2, the older your church gets, the more the front doors are closing. Do you understand what that means? The more your front doors are closing, that means less and less first-time guests are coming through. And we at the Springs, and you need to do it here, you need to fight to keep those front doors open. Fight with everything. Why? Because it's our mission. It's the mission God has given us to go and make disciples. We have to do it. We have to do it. It's what we're called to do. But just know, the older your church gets. I pastored a church that was 60 years old in Homerville, Georgia. And it was a real fight to get the front doors back open again. You got to make that fight. You got to get in that battle. So cleanliness is next to godliness. You need to have easy wayfinding. That's like really good signage. Clear next steps. What is if a guest comes in, what is their next step? What are they going to do? I think I'll hit that up in a minute. Guests are greeted 2 to 4 times before they sit down. So you can't just have 2 or 3 greeters, because they won't get greeted 2 to 4 times before they sit down. You've got to have everyone as a guest, everyone as a greeter for that to happen. Yes?
Can you explain just a little bit when you say you have to fight to keep the front doors open? What do you mean?
So I'm trying to think about how to say this. Even for us as a church, we are now this group of people that we all know. And we can get real comfortable with that. And to be honest with you, we kind of, people who've been in a church for a long time, like our people that have been with us for 6 or 7 or 8 years, we stop looking outside the church. We literally repeat the same things. When we talk about DNA, I use the word DNA and culture. I literally repeat the same thing every week, and I've repeated the same thing every week for 10 years. And when I am absolutely so sick of saying it, when I think it's absolutely so mundane, I am so sick of saying it, the people in the seats are just starting to get it. And I have to push forward. Something that we say every week is that, and I'll talk about this again later, but so when we talk about tithes and offerings, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but we do a generous living moment. And I say this, we believe in generous living because we serve a generous God. A God who gave his only begotten Son, Jesus Christ. And then when I say, at the end of every single service, we say, hey, listen, Springs Church, we love you. Remember to live, love, lead, and launch. Live the gospel, love God and others, lead people to Christ, and launch into mission. Now go do it. And I say it every week. Every single week, because the world is fighting back for your time. You guys all have jobs. You guys all have all of those other things going on in your life. But God gave us a mission. And we're going to talk about that more tomorrow, even when we talk about loving your neighbors. But you're going to have to fight to keep the doors wide open in the front. The doors just get tighter and tighter and tighter. And what you'll find is, I'm just asking, how many first-time guests do you have, Pastor, on a weekly basis?
Probably an average first-time guest, I don't know, less than 5.
Okay, less than 5. Okay, so a couple of years ago, we were averaging, we're in a different town, different place, different thing, not comparing, but we would have anywhere, but this was without doing any advertising, because we were a new church, new place, we would have anywhere from 5 to 35 first-time guests. My point is that the older your church is, you've got to fight, and we're going to talk about how you do that fight in just a minute, okay? You maybe use that word fight, I don't always use that word, but I'll use that word fight when I'm talking about some of these things. So, guests are greeted 2 to 4 times before they sit down. We don't point, we escort. We don't point, we escort. We don't just say, hey, the bathrooms are over there. We say, hey, let me show you where the bathrooms are, okay? So we want to escort people. DNA and culture of your church. We're on deck and ready 20 to 30 minutes before service starts. And because I'm a Christian, I have to say, because the Holy Spirit would convict me, this doesn't always happen. But it's what we strive for. Because people are just naturally late, like especially in Tucson time. People are naturally late, but we are on deck and ready 20 to 30 minutes before service starts. Why? We need to be on deck. We need to be ready to go. We need to be, I don't know about you, but on a Sunday, so like my Sunday typically starts at around 5 a.m. on Sunday, because we have 4 services. And for me to have my mind mentally ready to talk to people and all that, I have to be at church early enough to go over my notes, go make sure my pro presenter is on the teaching TV that we have, because we have the big TVs up top, but we have the little TV that's my teaching TV. And so I have to make sure that's ready. I have to be able to kneel down at the altar and pray for the service and pray for the day. And I want to be done with all of that 30 minutes before anybody else usually shows up. Because if not, I'm going to be running around chaotic. I'm going to feel anxious. I'm not going to be able to get my mind on people. I'm not going to be able to talk to guests if I see them, because I'm going to have my mind on what I'm doing. Does that make sense? And even for you, you need to have time. If you're a teacher, if you're a greeter, get here early. Invest that time. I would urge you to do that. And another reason, we want to have a prayer time. You want to have a team prayer time. You want to get together with your teams. This happens and then doesn't happen. We're really good about getting it to happen with the worship team and the tech team. I try to make it happen with our cafe and our guest greeter team. I try to make sure that happens, but we want to have a prayer time. Listen, prayer changes things. Prayer changes our hearts. Doesn't prayer change things? Prayer changes our hearts. Prayer keeps us thinking about what God says is important. It makes us think about what's important. I'm going to say this, bathrooms again, all cap, matter. I haven't been in your bathrooms, haven't went to the bathroom, but I promise you my wife's going to talk about it later, because I know she has been. All right? You have, right? I knew it. So bathrooms matter. We met in an elementary school the first 2 years, and those bathrooms were elementary bathrooms. That is the worst, okay? Elementary school, borrowed bathrooms, the worst. You know, one of the first things we did when we got to the school for setup, I went in, I took cleaner, I cleaned them again, even though they were clean. I cleaned them again. I bought smell good stuff. We put little trays in there. In the men's bathroom, we had men's lotion. In the women's bathroom, we had women's lotion. Outside on a little table, we had mints. Anything we could do. Remember, excellence is doing the very best you can with what you have. Being excellent with what you have, with what God has given you. Bathrooms matter. Modernity, dated versus current, digital versus print. So I'm going to speak to this. So you guys have already started doing this, and I want to praise you for that. I haven't actually gotten to go in the new, sanctuary yet, but you guys have already started working on this, and I know that was a lot of work. But you guys have like remodeled, right? Like your whole worship area. That is so cool. But when I say fight for it, you guys have more work to do. I'm just going to tell you, you have more work to do. How long's your facility been here?
30.
Since 87?
Yeah, 34 years.
All right. Then just know this: a facility is going to constantly bring work. It's just going to constantly bring work, and you have to come together as a church. You constantly do that. So you want to work on dated versus current. So if anything looks dated, we've got to look at that. We've got to. How many seconds do we have before a guest decides they're coming back or not?
8.
What have they seen by the time in 8 seconds? So I'm going to ask you a question. What's more important, and don't get mad at me, but what's more important, your sanctuary or your parking lot?
Sanctuary.
No. I'm not. He's firing me right now. The sanctuary was a must. The sanctuary was a must. I'm not questioning that. What I am saying to you is, hear me out. I'm going to just say this in this room, and if you get mad at me, I'm sorry. Hey, listen. Listen, wait. Bring it back. Bring it back. I hit a soft spot. So come back. What I am saying is there are some things as I drove around where we need to plant some new flowers. Can I just get an amen? We just need to plant some flowers. We need to throw some color in out there. We're going to change them parking signs. We're going to change a few things. Listen, I'm telling you, 8 seconds. Listen, are you guys going to leave the church because of the outside? No. But you know what also that tells me? You don't worry about the outside. You don't worry about it. But I'm going to tell you this. You have a church across the street. And listen, we're talking guests here. People are trying out churches. And you got 8 seconds. Hear me out. You got 8 seconds, right? So don't get mad at me. I'm going to say this. I saw the remodel on Facebook, just pictures. And there was this 1980s mauve carpet, right? People, that needed to go. Like about 18 years ago. Okay, so praise God. Praise God, we remodeled. But here's the deal. Listen to me. You did a remodel and you picked mauve again?
Same colors.
Hey, when we're done, we're going to have an altar call, all right? And all of you who voted for that, we're going to pray over that. Listen, we're getting lost in the weeds here. Don't miss what I'm saying. You cannot allow personal preferences to overtake the mission of God. And I have done a church revitalization, and I'm going to tell you what Ed Stetzer would tell you. It takes 3 times the amount of money and 3 times longer to revitalize a church than it does to start a new one. But I'm going to ask you something. Is First Church worth revitalizing?
Yes.
Then personal preferences need to go out the window. Because personal preferences slow the work down. I'm just going to be straight. When I was in Homerville, it took 5 years for me to, and I hope this is not a source, I'm scared to say anything now. So it took 5 years for me to get drums in the church because they had a pastor that tried to bring drums in back when drums would send you straight to hell, do not pass go, do not collect $200. And so those people had to continue that fight. They had to continue that fight. And they fought me. But you know what I did when they pushed back? I stopped pushing. I wasn't a bulldozer. You have to know how to lead. And I didn't push back. So what I did was we hired a youth pastor, and he created a youth band with all their children and grandchildren on it. And it had drums. And they played on Sunday. And I kid you not, that week, my wife will tell you, I received 3 cards in the mail that were handwritten cards that said from the matriarchs and patriarchs in the church that would have crucified me if I'd have brought drums in on my own. And they said, that was the most amazing music we have ever had. I don't think you'll get any more pushback about drums. But I want to ask you a question. I had to wait 5 years to make that move to get drums. At the church I'm at now, and it's just because we're set up different, I now go, hey, Brandon, we need a TV in the lobby. Do you want to do that? TV. And it's done. And we move forward, and it's not a thing. And so what I'm telling you is you got to decide what is more important, mission of God or personal preference. And it's not about not talking about stuff or not having a feelings or opinions, but what I'm telling you is when I say door, you got to fight to keep the doors open, it's those personal preferences that are closing the doors. Let me tell you that right now. It's the personal preferences that'll have my wife sitting at a table by herself. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not being mean. Please don't take me. I'm not being mean. I'm telling you, I'm speaking some truth here to you. I've been on both sides of this fence. I know. I spent a decade building a new facility at a church that had had 2 prior pastors. I would get their plans out of a dusty closet and go, this was his plans. This was his plans. And it was because of the personal preferences, they could never move forward and get a shovel in the ground. And I finally, at one of the meetings, after 3.5 years of working on it and stressing about it, I just said, this is your church. I am just here to serve you. If you don't want to build a facility, that's fine. I will do multiple services. We will do whatever we want, but stop wasting my time. And I drove off from the meeting, and the next day they had a working plan, and we broke ground 3 weeks later. You understand what I'm saying? But sometimes we got to put personal preference aside. So, dated versus current, digital versus print. So we try to push most everything to digital. We want to teach people to be self-feeders, okay? Because if you don't become a self-feeder, you have to self-feed everywhere else. Does your healthcare call you and tell you, say, hey, read this right here, it's in your bulletin? No. You have to get online, you have to find out, you have to look at everything. We want people to be self-feeders because self-feeders are learning. Self-feeders are getting involved. Self-feeders are going to our app, they're going to our website. They're looking at things, they're engaging, and so we try to do that. There are a couple things we still print, and I'm going to talk about those. And then safety and security is a priority. Safety and security is a priority. We'll talk about more of that. So these are decisions that guests make, and I'm already at 10:19. I told you I was like worried about, it's too much time, but it's not enough time. It's going to be fine. How many of you have ever visited a church? I'm going to ask an honest question, and I'm going to sound like a heathen here, okay? But I want you to be honest with me. Visiting churches is like my least favorite thing to do, ever. It is so awkward and uncomfortable, and I always feel out of place, like when I go. How many of you have ever felt that way if you visited a church? Okay, so what we're talking about here, it's a legit thing. So these are decisions guests have to make. How do I get there? Where do I park? How do I get in? Where do I go once I'm inside? Where are the bathrooms? Where do I take my kids? Where do I sit? How long is the service? I have actually pastored a church where I have had church people ask people to move from their seat. That is a guest no-no. Okay? Where do I sit? And that's when I go back to saying personal preferences, how long is the service? What's going to happen in the service? What can I expect? Where do I go after the service? Where do I pick up my kids? And now I want to ask you a question. Answers to these questions, this is not a question. Answers to these questions reduces stress and anxiety. If we want people to come back to our church, we have to reduce that stress and anxiety. And we have to be engaging in that 8 seconds that we have. We have to be engaging. I'm going to move on because I got to move forward here. Greeting on the way in and on the way out. So your first greeter is your online presence, your website, your app, your social media. That is your first greeter. In the last 3 weeks, I've had 2 families that have told me, we've been listening to you online, we've looked at your app, we've looked at your website, and we really loved it, and then we decided to come. So whoever's in control of that, just know it's important. Your app and your website and your social media, that is your very first impression, that is your very first greeter. You need to have good signage, A-frames, flags, signs. Listen, you guys have been here for 30 years, but I'm going to tell you something, some colorful flags out by the road next to each driveway would be fantastic. You just take them in and out every Sunday, but put them out there with your new FC logo. I love that. You guys, that's a super cool logo. Put that FC logo out there. You need identifying lanyards. I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute. Identifying lanyards. First names only. Don't want people stalking us. We don't know. Curb greeters with hand signs. So greeters with hand signs. I'm going to show you what those are in a minute. In our lobby, we need to have hosts and hostesses and welcomers and connectors. We need people that their job, I have one guy, he's an old retired Baptist pastor, but honestly, nobody gets in our church new that doesn't talk to this guy. And most likely, he's already invited him over to dinner and they're going to be involved in his life group. I mean, no other life group has survived, but his, because he is a connector, he's a welcomer. You need check-in stations, and we're going to look at 2 different types of check-in stations that we have. You need breath mints, all caps. Nobody likes bad breath. It's a turnoff. It was when you were dating, and it still is now. Smile, be excited, high fives. Listen, if you look like you're sucking lemons at church, why would I want to come here? I'm just being honest. If you don't sing, and the one thing I want to do is worship the one true and living God. Singing is our opportunity to worship God. Smile, be excited, high fives. And then I don't know if you guys do this or not, and Lord knows I almost took this off. To shake hands or to not shake hands. And do you guys do that?
We did before COVID.
I didn't want to hurt feelings. I'm going to say this to you. Please listen to me. Please don't shake hands. Please do not do the shaking hands things. Everything we do and everything we don't do speaks. Everything we say, everything we don't say speaks. Listen, I know that you love to shake hands. It's personal preference. Okay? I know you love that. But I'm going to ask you a question. Can you shake hands before the service? Yes or no?
Yeah,
Can you shake hands after the service?
yeah.
Can you hug people, love them? Maybe not so much in COVID, but you could, right? All right, hear me out. When you shake hands in the middle of the service, you love it. And I'm going to throw my wife in here. So my wife always says this. Would you just say what you always say to me?
We're not a friendly church if we're only friendly to one another.
We're not a friendly church if we're only friendly to one another. And I have visited churches where they do the stand up and shake hands, and me and my wife are standing here, and everybody around us is hugging and loving each other, and we're standing here like this, like a couple of dummies.
Yeah. We see it.
And I'm going to tell you this right now. If you do that, your guests are gone.
Because it's an insider thing.
It's an insider thing. And they're not, and it says to them, remember, I'm going to go back to, remember we say, because we have to think on a different level. Remember what I told you, we're going to have to transform the way we think.
Yeah.
We have to think about how they're thinking, okay? If we want them to come back, we have to think about that awkward time we had at church and what made it awkward and how can I stop making it awkward, right? And that's what we focus on at the Springs Church. We really work hard. Do we have awkward moments? Of course we do. Do we do stupid things? Of course we do. Do we run people off? Of course we do. Everybody does. But we do our best not to do that, and we make an effort not to do that. Because I'm telling you, if everybody around you stands up and shakes hands for 3 minutes and the person standing there that's the visitor in your church doesn't get their hand shook, or maybe one person turns around and gives them the shake and then they're like over to Aunt Betsy and they're hugging her and stuff, that person is feeling uber awkward right there. There's been so many people that came to church and didn't come back because we were loving each other, but we didn't recognize and see how they viewed it. Does that make sense? I don't want to offend you. I've never done this talk in this scenario before, and I actually told my wife I was a little nervous, but because I'm always usually talking to pastors and church planners and stuff. But I want to say this to you as you think about this. You may be friendly to each other, but that may not, and you may actually be loving and friendly. That may be who you are, and I'm not questioning that. I think everybody in here is loving and friendly. You all been nice to me. You've all shook my hand. You spoke to me. You smiled. You were wonderful. But I'm saying, how does that transfer over to the person that's there? Have you ever, when you're visiting somewhere, you're the one that already feels insecure and awkward, right? And when you're feeling insecure, you transfer a lot of thoughts that may or may not be true. You're making assumptions, right? And we have to help those assumptions be on our side. So here's some pictures. So I'm going to stand up with this so I can look at these. So this is just a picture of our church sign. I want you to know that if I had this facility, just this facility, and you can pray for this. This is property and stuff in Tucson is unbelievable. I mean, for me to have a 10,000 square foot building on 6 acres of land would probably cost me $3 to $5 million, probably more closer to $4 to $5 million right now. And so our church meets in 4,600 square feet. How big is this facility? Do you know?
Gym size.
10. I'm going to say this to you. Look, you tell me if I'm wrong. This is our stage for our church, only smaller. And this is our sanctuary where the walls are, only smaller. And I have 4 kids' classes and a mothering room, a mother's room, and a lobby. That's it. And pre-COVID, we were running 450 to 500 because people are desperate to know Jesus Christ. They're desperate to be in community. They're lonely. Right now, because of COVID, we're running about 60, 70%. We've been running about 280 to 320, around in there. And we probably won't get back up to that 450 number for another year or more with the way things are. Next picture. This is kind of the front of our building. So this right here is our family entrance. And you can see our kids check in there. This is in a storefront, so we have a vet next to us and a pizza place to the right. There's benefits to that. We have a lady for $60 comes and paints this window. I do it every 6 months or so. She'll come and just scrape it off. And she'll paint something new for the kids just to keep it fresh and new. And we want the kids to know that they're welcome. We want them here. And we're going to take a break in just a minute. Next slide. This is one of our flags. We have these out by the road. They've kind of changed the rules, but the people who govern those rules are not out on Sunday, so I've actually spoke to the guy who's over it, and he said, I can't tell you this, but put them out on Sunday, take them up on Sunday, no one will ever say anything to you. So we put these flags out by the road, and you guys could have these. You guys could have these, and you could do these. It wouldn't cost you much money, and it brings a little bit of new life out there by the road because people need to recognize you. And I'm not saying, because we're not in competition with the church across the street, but you have a church across the street. Okay? So this next picture, Easter 2 years ago, we did 6 services. We had, how many people showed up? 750 people showed up in 6 services. This year we did 6 services because of COVID too, but I think we had 550 show up for Easter this year. Next slide. This is my greeter crew, and we're going to talk more about this, but these are the hand signs that I'm talking about. You see their lanyards. This is some of my greeter crew. Next slide. This is my retired Baptist pastor. His name's Don, and notice only first name in case somebody's creepy. But we have our lanyards, and the lanyard, you can't see this, but it says the Spring Church Volunteer. Hello, my name is Don. How can I help you? And you can order those and have those. And I'm going to say this, and this is going to get you in trouble again because I heard you say this, but we used to do shirts. Like we had the really cool like volunteer, and it said 1 down the middle, so it was like volunteer, but it said 1. It was really cool. And we love those, and people liked those. But what we found out is that the ladies were like, I don't want to wear the same t-shirt to church every single week. And so we moved to lanyards. And lanyards are one size fits all, so I don't have to keep size of those, and they're way cheaper. So we can have lanyards. And everybody that is on a team wears a lanyard. Everybody. So if you're a greeter, you wear a lanyard. If you're on the kids wing, you wear a lanyard. If you're in our cafe, you wear a lanyard. That lets people who come in know who to ask for help if they need it. Next sign, that's just a bigger up picture of that, same thing. You move on to the next one. This lady right here, that's my beautiful mama right here, and one of her friends there. And so we have people of all ages. Go to the next one. These are a couple more pictures of our signs that we use. You belong here, ready to worship. And so let me say, how many introverts do we have in here? Yes. And you're like, please don't ever make me a greeter. Right? Because I do not want to talk to people. I can see this like written all over your face right now. Like, please never make me talk to someone. But you can hold a sign. You can hold a sign and kind of not look mean. Like right now you're looking a little mean. That's better. That is so much better. Huh? Oh wait. He can be security. He's security. All right. But I'm just saying, I have introverts that greet. They don't have to say anything. They just have to put a kind of smile on their face and hold the signs. All right. Next one. So listen, anybody should be able to volunteer. No matter what they may be facing, okay? So we try to integrate everybody. And that family has since moved, but we loved him. He was great. Next slide. We want reflection of all ages. If I can get kids out there with their families, we want reflections of all ages. This was Chuck and Callie. They actually moved across town. They now attend another church, but we love them. They took us out for lunch, and I told my wife, I said, it's going to be a breakup lunch. I know it. And then he took us out for lunch. He didn't say anything. We're like getting ready to get up, and I'm like, he's not leaving, yes. And then he goes, hey, I need to talk to you about the church. I knew it was a breakup lunch. But we love them. They're very nice in how they leave. And it's fine to leave a church, but be nice about how you do it. But they were having to drive like 50 miles, and I said, you need to be within a few miles of your church, or you're not going to be effective. And so next slide. And this is just another family. So we love to have families with kids out there with greeters. We don't want to just have one age group. You know, we want to have diversity out there of all kinds. So here we go. Listen, we're going to take a break, go to the bathroom, we're going to come back, and then the second half will be a little faster. I'm saying that to make you feel better. All right? Hey, are you getting something out of it? Is it speaking to you? I hope it's speaking to you, okay? I'm glad. I appreciate so much being here.
They'll ask me, they don't even know. Yeah.
Over here, what the restaurants.
Yeah. And his daddy was
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I've been in some places at Goodman, matter of fact, I've been there maybe 2 times now. But I don't eat there very often.
Now, a lot of times I'm so I'll just think of it That's right. Yeah, exactly. But you'll go visit her. Are you from here?
Well, that's okay.
Well, I'm from Princeton, Smithfield, Crosby.